Welcome to the BAI Show. My name's James Rankin, and today we're doing a little bit of a different episode. It's just going to be me. So no interview. It's just going to be me, my journey. I'll also answer a few questions. So we did a post on Instagram just to get some questions from you guys and girls. And I'm going to be going through those today. So a bit of a different approach, but stay tuned. We're going to have some fun. So in terms of my personal journey, I haven't shared it with too many people other than the fact of I've always wanted to be in real estate. But if I was to rewind, like just to go right back to the start, I got exposed to real estate when I was pretty young. So my parents lived in a place called Narrowwarra North, and it was all acreage essentially, right? There was 12 houses on the street. And it was quite a long road. It wasn't like a small street or anything. And all around there was a new development. So we had the sales office literally on our block of land because mum and dad's house was one of few. And there was probably, I would say, I'm going back to my kid memory. So it's probably a bit of a shorter distance than what I recall, but maybe a kilometre between us and the next house. So that area, I think it was like 30 acres, was getting developed. It was all market garden. So it was essentially growing vegetables that went to market. So cauliflower, lettuce, all that kind of stuff. And the guy sold that off for $1 million. I remember that clearly because mum and dad were just like, oh my God, they sold next door for $1 million. That got turned into a subdivision. And back then they would they would actually develop the subdivision. So it was a board, but they would go and put the roads in. So all the roads were in, all the driveways were in, and now they had the sign up and they needed to put that somewhere. So they put that on mum and dad's block of land because that was separate to the development where they were doing the works, and they started selling the land. So with that board on there, I got exposure to it, and I was always on my push bike. But one of my early businesses was to mow the lawns. So I just got talking to the guys at the sales office, and I don't know how it came about, but I started James's mowing. I had little leaflets, but essentially they were pretty much the only guys I was marketing to. And I was able to mow all the lawns and the nature strips of all of those blocks of land that were getting developed. So if it was 30-ish acres, I think there was about 60 blocks because they're all half-acre blocks. So yeah, 60 of those nature strips I was mowing the lawns of. And over time, I got to know that development pretty well. And I was there on a weekend. The sales guys weren't there. So LJ Hooker was selling it. And I was on my push bike. Lady pulls up and she's looking at the sales board and she's looking at a block. I just rode up to her, as you do as a 12-year-old kid, and said, hey, I know where that block of land is. Do you want to go look at it? So I took her there on my push bike. Anyway, she ended up buying the block of land. So the sales guys came to my house or came to my parents' house, knocking on the door with a whole bunch of planner subdivisions, which is how they were selling the land back then, and a badge, a little LJ Hooker badge with my name on it. And at that point, I was hooked. LJ Hooker, I was hooked on real estate. And beyond there, so I always would talk about becoming a real estate agent or doing something in real estate pretty much since that moment. I had my next door neighbor as well, who was the actual developer. So he moved into my parents or next door to my parents. So this was the guy that developed the 30 acres, still lives there till today. And I got exposure to him and his friends. The next part of the story goes on to me seeing one of his friends. So this guy's name's Gary. One of his friends show up in a Dodge Viper. And I was just like, because I was friends with his kids, Nathan. And I just said to him, Nath, like, whose car is that? And he's like, oh, that's Uncle Greg. And then I was like, I'm doing whatever Uncle Greg does, which was a developer. So over school, all of that stuff, I had no aspects to go to further study. Like I was just hell-bent on getting out into the world of real estate. Tried to do it straight out of school, straight out of year 12. I did work experience in year 10 at a company in Malvern called Thompson. And he said, come back when, it's only a couple of years later, come back and I'll give you a job. I went back and I said, hey, John, I'm here for a job. Sorry, mate, market's really crap. we can only put you into property management, but even that is a stretch. So go and get some life experience and come back to me. And essentially that's what I went and did. I ran a whole bunch of businesses, from car detailing to car wrapping to import export. I did go to uni. I did import export. Like after I got the news from John, I applied for whatever that second round is. Like it wasn't straight out of school. I think I went to the next semester, starting in like July, August, and I did international trade. So that was a commerce degree, but essentially import export, because that was my next passion, where it wasn't going to be real estate initially. So I went and did import export. So that took me to, about 19 or so, 19 years old. I actually got a job with a company that I was able to do the import export. That opportunity gave me to do what I was studying, right? So I didn't actually have to do the study anymore. So I dropped out of the course, dropped out of the further education, and just started doing that. So I got put into the design part of that company, and I was going overseas. I had to go to China, help set up factories, but my job was process. So creating SOPs. Essentially, these guys were building signs, backlit signs for Pizza Hut, KFC. Like if you've been through a drive-through within the last 15 years, you would have seen one of their boards at a KFC store. So the drive-through menu boards, that's what they manufactured. So I was in the design team and I was bringing in all the componentry. There was a couple of standards because they had a contract for the UAE. So we had to meet some standards there. They also had a contract for the US. So had to have all the electrical compliance for them. Learned a lot about processes and how to teach people who had no idea what I spoke or language I spoke. So going into China when I was 19, 20 and try to explain the factory that we had initially, again, this is going back nearly 20 years for me in my memory. It was enormous, enormous, where the point of walking to the other side of the factory was an effort. You know what I mean? It was almost, I really don't want to walk to the other side of the factory to go and check something out. So I was the youngest in that group, drew the shortest straw and got the task of essentially blowing or stripping back what those signs were to build and all the componentry that went along with it, and literally saying, well, there's 100 components here. What does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 100, what does it do? And how do you install it into the sign? And there was probably 15 different sign types. So I had to create all the SOPs on that, all the SOPs on that, and then take that over to China. Also set up the manufacturing flow, so the production line over there, again, as a pretty young person. So early on, I was really thrown in the deep end, but I also threw myself in the deep end. So as much as I drew the short straw, I was like, hell yeah, I want to go to China and see what it's all about, because I was so interested in import export. I got to hire staff. I got to go to different cities, literally would specialize in different parts. So we would go to Ningbo, which is where our factory was. They were heavy into automotive, so we could get lots of rubber, lots of steel components and screws and all of that kind of stuff in that region was pretty easy. But you would literally fly to another area. I remember going to Shanghai just to go to look at locks. So where 3M locks were manufactured for our signs, I had to go to Shanghai. I didn't fly actually, I just caught the train down. But that's where I had to go to find these specific locks. So it was so interesting to find out how all of that worked. And again, at a very young age, to establish, what building SOPs were, how to roll out new products and new production lines in a brand new country where no one knows what I am talking about, then actually being successful in delivering a product. So that just led me to understanding how to problem solve, right? Because there's many, many problems that came along that journey. One being when I got there, after we'd packed up a container to send over to China from Melbourne, it had all our machinery, right? So we bought a whole bunch of machinery and we sent it over there, and it got to the factory. So this 40-foot container got to the factory, And I'm like, okay, no worries. Like, where's the crane? You know what I mean? Like the truck that picked up the container in Melbourne had a crane attached to it. The one that delivered the container didn't have a crane. And they were like, we don't have those here. And I was like, okay, you can't Google as well. Like, this is nearly 20 years ago. It probably was actually 20 years ago in China. Couldn't Google what a crane truck was. So I'm there trying to figure out what we're doing. We had to go to the next factory and they just had a dock. So it was essentially just a platform that was the same level as the container and the truck. So the floor met that floor and we had to unload it by hand. Like, I'm talking thousands of kilos of machinery that we had to unload by hand, and we had to get people from the next door factory. It was just crazy. But to be exposed to all of that kind of stuff pretty early on was awesome. Like, now I look back at it, it was such a good apprenticeship, which then just moved on to probably my next real business, which was in the automotive space. So I had a detailing business straight out of school with a friend of mine. So we were just detailing cars and I got to know what that business was. We built that up. I ended up buying the remainder of that off him and ran with that. We got a contract for AAMI. So this is after all of the signage stuff. I got a contract for AAMI and I had 7 guys working for me. Again, I would have been early 20s. That led me to understand on like how not to run a business, because I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Like, seriously, I had 7 dudes working for me. I just bought a GTO, like a HSV GTO. I thought I was living large, sipping on pina coladas. I was set. But little did I know that wasn't the case. You need to manage people. And that's what I was really bad at back then. So managing people to me because I was a hard worker. Like, I thought I was a pretty good worker, that everyone else that I was giving an opportunity to was going to be a hard worker as well. But, you know, I didn't have the best people there. So lots of complaints, lots of people not showing up, and it really started to put pressure on it as a business. So that was the contract that I won. We had 3 different locations, but that started to phase out because it was all to do with the hailstorms. Like, we had some large hailstorms about 16 years ago. And that's what, enabled me to grow that business pretty quickly. But as that started to taper off, I then shifted that business and went into a partnership with another mate of mine who had started a business, and I was originally meant to get involved in it, but the other stuff was just going pretty well at the time because we had the same car. So he had a GTO and I had a GTO, and it was like, oh, this would be a really good start of it. And I remember the conversation with him. A couple of months later, I ended up, joining him anyway. So that business had already started. It was doing wraps. It was doing like car wraps. So that's just a big sticker that goes on the car. But it was also doing suspension and wheels. But everything was done out of house, right? So we didn't have much in-house at that point. We were just doing like a line, like a decorative thing on tires at that moment in-house. So at that time, I started to implement, all right, well, let's bring it all in-house. Like, let's start to bring everything in-house. And as that grew, we did bring everything in-house. But in that business, the thing that I learned the most was marketing. So Troy, business partner, really good marketer. That business is still going today. But in terms of what we'd understood or what we'd come to understand was purely by fluke. We just had to put up a photo of a car that was out the front of the shop with maybe a sticker on it from us. And that would bring us our next round of leads or our next round of people contacting us. And essentially we just managed Facebook and Facebook messages. This is going back quite some time, like well over 10 years. And that's now sell by chat. So sell by chat, we were doing it. I remember staying up till midnight, most nights, replying. And then because these kids, younger, early 20-year-olds with Commodores and Falcons, they were online pretty late. By the time I got to the office at 6 the next morning, I'd already have another 80 messages. And that was pretty much the day between Troy and I. But when we were building that business, I literally remember sitting there. The phone was ringing. There was people out the front door. and I can see it so clearly. We had a yellow chain across the front so people couldn't come into the shop. We might have had like one or two guys working. Oh no, we might not have had anyone working for us at that time. Maybe it was like sporadic, but I was under a car. Troy was maybe with someone or under another car. And I was just like, we need to hire. We need to do something about this. And that's where I learned like hire when it hurts. And I've always really taken that approach. But again, going back to my early days in that process building was we had a process, like I had the process sort of mapped out in my head. So it's pretty easy for me to like pass that on. But if you asked me back then if I was a good manager, I would still say no, because I ruled with an iron fist. Like literally it was my way or the highway. And I was pretty ruthless. Like I was really direct. There was some guys there that I got on really well with, and then some others I would just be not an asshole, because I still bought them all. Like if it was Friday or Saturday lunch, I'd always buy them lunch. So I was all about that team camaraderie. But if you did something wrong, or if you did something out of what we were wanting to do and achieve, then yeah, I wasn't on board for it. So yeah, that business went on. I moved on from it. I was fortunate enough to move on from there in a positive position. And that's when I got into real estate. So that was my moment where I flicked into real estate. I was mid-20s and I went back and worked for Uncle Greg. So the guy that I mentioned who was the developer that lived next door, his friend Greg, I went and worked for him. So he was my first opportunity into this space. And that was a developer. So he literally just gave me the keys to a display home. They did custom builds and said, go and try and sell these things. No freaking idea what I was doing in terms of house sales, other than I just built my own house. Didn't have a great experience, but thought, you know what, let's give this a crack. I just felt this was my time to move into the property world. I'd built up like a ton of life experience, which, you know, probably why Greg wanted to give me a shot, because he'd heard all of the stuff that I'd done prior. And with all of that, I kind of just figured out sales. But I was fortunate to sit there with a really good sales manager who just taught me a lot, like in terms of sales. So being observant, understanding like what people are doing, how to react with people, how to control people on phones. I learned so much from him. Like his name's Dale. I learned a whole bunch of stuff from Dale, and you know he probably wouldn't accept this now if he listened to it, but he was a really good sales manager. And yeah, I spent hours and hours and hours with him just learning. So whatever my day looked like, if that finished at 5 p.m. at the displays or 5:30, I literally just drove back to the office where he generally was, and I'd spend another 2 hours with him. Like easily another 2 hours with him. I remember just sitting on his door, or like leaning on his door in his archway or on his architrave, and just talking to him, just talking whatever, you know, for hours and hours and hours. The other part of that was in the morning, the display generally didn't open till about 12 o'clock. So I would go in there in the morning in the hopes that I would get time with Greg and just be a sponge. Like all I was back then was a sponge. I earned bugger all in these first years, because it takes quite some time for your money to come through. And I think in the first year of real estate, like my real estate paycheck, I was fortunate enough to have a paycheck from the automotive business, which kept me going. But my first paycheck was like 28 grand in the real estate world, because I didn't look at it as this was a chance for me to earn. It was a chance for me to learn. And that's all I viewed it as, right? So I'm with some pretty heavy hitters. Like these guys own 600-700 properties, like crazy numbers. I'm just going to sit here and be a sponge. I just want to know everything that they've done in their journey. That goes on and on and on. And I worked for another builder for a short period of time, like in terms of everything. And then that was the moment where I said, hey, I'm doing this buyer's agent thing. So I got good exposure to developments, and it was time for me to get my own cash flow business so that I could go do developments. But I also wanted to keep a finger on the pulse. So I was listening to podcasts. Like you could not get me off property podcasts back then. And I was listening to The Property Couch. And then all of a sudden, Ben Handler came along and started listening to some of his stuff, quit the 9 to 5. And I think I would have listened to one episode of his and I called. Like I just called straight away, booked in with him. Ben actually sold. He was doing the sales calls at the time because it was very early on in terms of BAI. And I just said, yep, no worries, sign me up. I'm good to go. I want to do this. Figured out what you needed to do from compliance because I'd finished up at the builder. Much as it took probably 18 months to build up your cash flow in the building world, you had about 18 months of cash flow afterwards. So I was pretty set for about a year. Like I had a good amount of cash flow coming into my bank account off the back of being in that world. So I just said, I'm doing this. I'm quitting everything and I'm just going to jump into this. My early time in the BA space was literally locked myself in the room because I saw that being the blocker. I saw the license being the blocker for me. I did the course as well. So I'm a bit of a, nutcase when it comes to learning that kind of stuff. I listened to stuff on two times speed. So just smashed through all that stuff, all the course content. Did go back and review a lot of it. So around the LinkedIn stuff and how to contact external or referral partners, that was a big component that I did put on repeat because that's what the business was, right? Like it's all about generating leads, generating marketing. Did my license with Leverage. They flew down to Melbourne and they ran a group of maybe 10 in a week. I did all of that and I was the first to submit. So out of that 10, I was the first to submit my coursework and I got my license. And then I was off. Like I was off to the races. And when I say that I went probably too hard to keep up with the amount of people I was reaching out to, I was having about 40 meetings a week. So I was reaching out to 100 a day, like a lot. It was probably beyond that. It was whatever I got. I don't even think LinkedIn had maximums back then, but whatever it was, I was doing the maximum. So booking in about 40 meetings a week for, I would say, a month or so, but doing that. So what's that, 160? I didn't have a process set up to go and speak to those or follow up all of those people. So that was probably my biggest mistake early on. And I just spoke to the people who raised their hand. They just said, hey, like I want to do this thing with you. Let's continue that conversation. Whereas I probably could have built the business a bit quicker if I had a better follow-up process with those initial reach outs. In terms of where that led and where that went on to, the first client was actually a vendor advocacy client. So in Melbourne, vendor advocacy is a thing. And he came through an accountant and we helped him sell his house. Helped him sell his house in Donvale. And then we bought him a property out in Pakenham. So he was single parent. I think he owned that house outright and he just wanted to downsize, take some cash out of it. He was a plumber. I still remember it like to this day. He wanted to take, some cash out, not work as hard, and then, go and buy his next property in cash and, just relieve some stress. The next client, like the actual first buyer's agent client, was a cybersecurity person, and I think she was a teacher. The moment of me going through that process with them, like in terms of the buyer's agency process, I knew it wasn't clicking for him. And I think I was quite lucky with the sell because I asked them the question around how much are you paying for rent? And I think they said, it was $500 or something like that. I said, all right, cool. Let's do the maths on this. So $500. And I'd heard somewhere that the average time to purchase was about 9 months average. So it could be much more and it could be less than that. But I worked off 9 months. So, rough terms, $18,000. And our fee was like, I'm going to say it was like 12 or 13 grand back then. And immediately he was just like, okay, I see this. I see this being the thing that we want to do because you're actually going to save me money. And that's how I signed up the first few clients, was based on fingers crossed that they were renting. A whole bunch of people came from that initial sign up. So they weren't from, I actually don't recall where they came from. They weren't my inner circle, but I used their inner circle to get all of the next clients. And then it stemmed on from there. We hit COVID. COVID was obviously a bit of a tricky time. We had about 70% of clients say they don't want to do anything, like they just want to stop and see what was going on, which is fair enough. I would be struck. This is very, very early on in terms of the COVID announcement and what was happening with it. at that time, so that's probably fast forwarding a little bit to early 2020 when all of that kicked off, we merged with a mortgage broker. So we had a space, like we had our own office, we had some team, right? So we had a couple of people working for us and then probably an offshore team as well. So when that hit, I absolutely shit myself. I was like, what are we going to do? Like, I've got personal matters, but I've also got team matters, like paying for our office building, because none of that stuff had really come out yet. So I went and got a job at Woolworths in the distribution center. So distribution center in Mulgrave, I think it is. And I just worked night shift. So I'd work in the BA business and the mortgage broking business during the day. And I went to the DC center and packed pallets at night because I had no idea what was happening. And I just wanted to keep as much cash flow coming through the business. Fortunately, that was only for a couple of weeks. And I would have kept doing it if we had to, though. But yeah, fortunately enough, there was some stuff that came out from government support. Maybe it's a kick in the teeth now with all the government taxes coming in Victoria. But for me, it was always about, I'll just do whatever it takes to keep the business afloat. And I probably overreacted as well. Like going and working for I don't know, $1,500 a week was definitely a bit of an overreaction, but no one knew back then. No one knew what COVID was going to be. But my point is, I was just willing to do whatever it was to keep that business going. So fast forward, the business now, I've weaned myself off it. I don't have too much to do with the day-to-day. There's a person in place who runs that business. So he does all of the local buying in Melbourne. And then there's two people that run the investment side. And then we have a couple of support staff. That transition for me, like I get asked that question all the time. Like, you know, do you have much activity in that business day to day? I treat it very similar to Everest. Like I provide as much coaching as I need or they need within that business. A lot of the time I'm calling them, they're not calling me. So I'm probably a little bit of definitely not micromanager, but maybe a parent just wanting to find out about the kids and how they're going, and the kids going, leave me alone, mum. You know, I kind of feel that's how I'm in that business now, which is awesome because they're self-sufficient, but they'll come to me when they've got a problem. But that journey, so that handover journey probably took 18 months to 2 years. Like that was a journey to get them up to speed on how this business works, how to sell, how to market, test different things, all of that. It did take some time. So one of the questions that got asked was, if I could, knowing all the stuff I know now, what would I do differently if I was starting again? Honestly, I think my perception on what it means to be successful in this business with my reach out, I don't think I would have changed too much because I went pretty hard. And when I say that to people these days, they're just like, that was a bit crazy. But it wasn't crazy to me because I just needed to speak to as many people as possible. So I wouldn't change that part of it. And I would stress that to people who are thinking about getting into this world and this industry to not take that lightly. Like, you are in control of that. You can literally speak to as many people as you can in a day, right? If you think you're doing enough, can you do more? Like, take that 100 reach out as the minimum, like 100 people to reach out to a day as the minimum. That's in my eyes. Like, if I was starting this business again, I would see that as the benchmark, like the bare minimum benchmark. But rolling up to nowadays in other parts of the business, what would I have done or what would I do specifically? It would be around niching down, right? So I've always said, if I was to start this business again, I would just call myself the Glen Iris buyer's agent. That's where I live. Or Burundara, or very, very niche. So that's how I would do it. And I would be just hyper focused on knowing every single property transaction, and I would produce a lot of content on that. So I don't know how many transactions are done in Burundara, like if we'll just say Burundara or even Glen Iris, because it's quite a large suburb. But you could run a buyer's agency business. If you're in that boutique space and you're charging 2%, you could run a very successful buyer's agency within that world, because anyone buying in there would probably want to speak to you. So yeah, if I was to do it differently, I would probably niche down a little bit harder at the start, because whilst that might be a bit of a slower burn, it's definitely going to make me the expert and attract people into this, into speaking to me, because I am the perceived expert by calling myself that Glen Iris buyer's agent. So yeah, I guess that's probably where I would take it, where I would wrap my journey up. But what we might do now is just flick over into a couple of questions that I've also got from our Instagram post. I've covered that off in terms of my first client. So yeah, in terms of capital, I know I said I was fortunate with having a cash flow from a previous business. The whole business wouldn't have cost me more than $5,000 to get set up. Like beyond the course, beyond BAI and my compliance, the $5,000 would have got me through a year easily in terms of costs. You don't need CoreLogic. You don't need Pricefinder or Stash or any of that kind of stuff to get going. When you get a client, then you can go, all right, well, they've signed up. I've got a retainer of $3,000. A $3,000 retainer is going to pay for Stash for the whole year. So you don't need to worry about that stuff initially. Yes, it's good to be aware of it, but don't worry about it. Like just go out there and get the first clients, speak to as many people as possible. I probably would have spent $2,500 on coffees in that initial year, because that's what I was doing. I was more focused on the reach out and speaking to as many people as possible versus what my platforms were going to cost, because that was just part of the business, right? Like that was just something that I'd have to take into account. So how long before I replaced my full-time income? I think I did like 18 deals in the first year. So it wasn't screaming along. I think it was around that 18 mark. So if you said the average was 10, yeah, 180 grand or thereabouts in that first year, it was a decent enough income and it didn't cause too much pressure in my life. Okay, so there's a question around like the day-to-day as a buyer's agent. So what does the day-to-day of a buyer's agent look like? Tough question in terms of which buyer's agent you're specifically talking about. So I'll take you through both of them. If you're looking at a investment buyer's agent, which tends to be a bit of a like the it situation at the moment, like there's a lot of focus on becoming an investment buyer's agent. I actually don't think there's too much of an advantage over that, or any advantage versus an owner occ, which I'll talk about in a second. If you're an investment buyer's agent, heavy on sales, heavy on marketing, probably going to be more competitive in your sales calls. So you need to have a really strong sales process, always doing training on sales, always testing marketing, putting yourself out there, not only on podcasts or Instagram, TikTok, YouTube videos, creating blogs, speaking on property forums and Facebook posts, all that kind of stuff. Like it's quite intense around what you need to do in order to get yourself out there. And then also from a delivery perspective, so we've got attract, convert, deliver. So attract being marketing, convert being sales, and then the delivery piece. So once you've signed the client up, then you've actually got to go and deliver the purchase. So from a day-to-day perspective, that's going to be like seriously melting your phone by speaking to real estate agents. So your task is literally just to call as many real estate agents as possible to find out what is upcoming. You shouldn't be on realestate.com as much as you need to be. You shouldn't be reliant on realestate.com or domain to give you insights as to the property market. You should know that by your real estate contacts. So it would be heavy on speaking to real estate agents, mortgage brokers as well, like on behalf of your clients to understand, or if you're putting in an offer, you need to get them across what you're putting in. And it's just a confirmation on, hey, this is what we're buying for client XYZ. Is it okay? Like, is everything okay for us to submit this offer based on these terms? Yep, tick that off. DD, so due diligence, that's going to be another heavy component of what you're doing from a day-to-day perspective, because you speak to the real estate agent, you get confirmation from the broker, then you're going into heavy DD. And that might be initial due diligence in order to submit an offer and complete the first part of the transaction. And then when you get the building and pest inspection back, you've got to complete due diligence there as well. And then you would roll into, I'm just going through the process step by step. Then you would have settlement. So what settlement might look like for your client? Are you going out and are you meeting them? Are you sending out gifts? Are you giving them phone calls? All of that piece would be in a day, right? Like you could have all of this happening in a day. The changeover of that and the difference or variation between that and an owner-occ buyer's agent. An owner-occ buyer's agent is probably going to be doing more on the ground research. So whilst they're still on the phone speaking to a lot of agents, they're probably going to go and look at open homes as well. So if you're a local area expert doing owner-occs, you might be having a coffee with a real estate agent. You might be going out and seeing a property that is relevant to your clients or doing research as well. So you might not have a client at a particular price point, but you know that a $2 million client might pop up or you've got one in the pipeline. So you're going to go and look at an open home. I'd say the owner-occ buyer's agents are more of that true real estate lover. Like they really enjoy property and going through open homes, whereas the investment buyer's agent, they're probably more driven around that data and wealth creation component. There is a difference in personality types, I see. That's how the days would differ between the two of them. So yeah, more in-person stuff versus over the phone, really trying to hunt down properties. Let's have a look at another question. All right, how do you build confidence if you're new to sales? Yeah, this is a hard question in terms of if you haven't done sales before and you're not willing to learn sales or you're not willing to put yourself in a position to get better at doing sales, you're never going to improve. And I know that might seem odd, but I see this happening with people all the time. I run the weekly Kaizen clinics within BAI and people will show up and they'll ask a question on what CRM system do I need? What costs are going to be involved when I get CoreLogic? Do you have CoreLogic? Do you have Stash? What insurance should I get? What does general office space cost? All these questions, right, which have nothing to do with getting a client or sales. And my initial response to them is, have you signed up a client yet? And generally it's no. And I'm like, well, you don't need to worry about that stuff yet. You need to worry on the sales part of it. And anyone that comes to the sales clinic, I will say to everyone on that call, you are not an entrepreneur yet. You are a salesperson. And if sales is icky to you, you better get over it because you will fail. Like you will fail at this business. And I'm totally okay at saying that. Unless you go and hire a salesperson. If you've got $100,000 in the bank and you can go and hire a salesperson and you can market, by all means, go for it. But if you're wanting to do this as a startup, as a lean operation and do majority of it yourself initially, you're going to have to learn sales. So how do you build confidence? You read books, you come to the sales clinic, you do role plays. We have role play sessions. You can learn a lot of this stuff in a controlled environment, but nothing is going to be better than actually putting yourself in that situation of sales. You are going to stuff it up. So give yourself the okay to stuff this up. It's why I say to a lot of people, if you don't have a year in savings or 6 months in savings, don't quit your job. You know what I mean? Like don't just jump into this without having some backing because it can be quite stressful. And that's just going to shine through on a sales call. So yeah, you have to go through the motions. If you've never done sales before, it doesn't matter. It's something you can learn for sure. I've actually seen a lot of people do quite well with no sales background. So you don't have to have that. If you have sales background, cool. Like it's a starting point for you, but we sell a bit differently in terms of what works in the real estate space. So if you've been selling in retail or you've been selling as a BDM in other businesses, it's a really good base to come in on it. But it doesn't mean if you don't have a base that you can't learn it, because I would say it's probably one of the quickest skills you can learn. All right. So just as we round out, so I'd love to hear your experience as a buyer's agent, what kinds of challenges you have faced when working with clients and how did you navigate them? This is why we do what we do. Like in terms of why I do these podcasts, why I do the Kaizen Clinic, why I do the sales clinic, why we run Everest is because we can't download our brain, like myself, Ben, Elaine, anyone else in the coaching team, we can't download our brain and give that to you to access as a book, right? Or something that you could download and put into your brain. Like as much as we'd wish that, and AI is moving pretty quickly, we might be able to do it soon, but that's not available right now. So in terms of these situations, it's just going through the motion. Like experience is going to teach you the majority of the skills and how to work through problems. Because of what we do, and we're dealing with, high value purchases, we're dealing with emotions, we're dealing with external companies like conveyancers or solicitors, you will come up against stuff, right? Like we come up against stuff all the time. And if I was to come up against a situation that I haven't been familiar with, yeah, it might be a bit scary, but I know that we've done it 100 times before and we'll figure it out. Like we'll work it out. As long as we know where we sit and we're compliant and we've done the right thing, then there's a way out. So that might look like the first time a conveyancer doesn't accept your building and pest inspection, or the first time a conveyancer doesn't accept your finance clause. So you can get these pushbacks from conveyancers. And let me tell you, the first time that it comes up, you absolutely shit yourself. Like you just do, because it's like, holy crap, what have I done? Like my client's going to kill me. It's generally the conveyancer on their side is just buying time, or they're just being a bit of a dick, and you can work your way out of it if you've done everything right on your side. And that's generally working with a good conveyancer or solicitor. But those moments will come up. So I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. You will come up against issues like that. Just know it's a part of what we do in this world. It's a part of real estate. There's many different opinions, but you'll be able to work through it. Like you will be able to work through it. So on that, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys listening. I hope I didn't waffle on too much at the start, but this was awesome, and we might do another one in the future. See you guys. Bye.